Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm not your typical kind of like speaker. I got pulled in this last second, but it's good. So the reason why I agreed to do this, I think it's critical to be able to understand convergence with IT and OT, and to be able to protect OT infrastructure. And I'll go into that a little bit from my background. So I'm Dennis Grimsley. I work at Cyber Ranges currently. I actually retired out of Cyber Command. I ended up there by accident. I came like out of the Air and Space Center in Qatar dropping bombs, and I ended up at Cyber Command in 2010 when they were standing up and they go, well, what are we going to do with this guy? So they put me in charge of like running the offensive operations for Cyber Command. So I was the deputy chief of fire. So I took all of the same acronyms and just changed them around. So instead of doing like a master air attack plan, we did a cyber attack plan. Instead of doing an air tasking order, we did cyber tasking order. And so for like a cyber tasking order, for me to be able to tap red teamers that potentially are at NSA, I'd cut an order. They would go from Title 50 doing intel work to now doing Title 10, doing DoD work. And then they would go back to their normal intel job. That's how it originally was set up. And then Cyber Command decided to build their own force. Now we have the Cyber Mission Force with 8,000 people that are now doing the bidding of Title 10 to be able to either attack or defend along that way. So we had a great talk about like attack vectors and nation states and everything else. So let's just go to the next slide. So these are some of the things that I want to cover. So as we're talking about now, nation states, they're very, very hard with a motivated nation state person. And I can tell you, so when I came into Cyber Command and they were trying to figure out what to do with me, they sent me off to targeting school. And so I was like, okay, and I'm going to try to figure out how to like target non-kinetic stuff. And so in my mind, as a nation state actor and somebody that could be persistent with all these resources, to be able to look at like potential attack places and things where you can make things happen. Rather than OT, they talk about dams and bridges and physical and kinetic effects that you can have through the internet, through IT, and like through OT. So a lot of stuff that we would look at is, you know, when you're looking at other countries, they have a lot of legacy systems in place that then you would have to go back and essentially go on the dark web and purchase stuff that looks like that, or be able to emulate that, to be able to understand what it looks like. So that way you can then be able to replicate it, practice on it, do mission rehearsals, train on it. So that way in the future, you can either attack it. So my mindset's always looking for the gaps, and the defender's mindset is always like, let's layer stuff so they can't get in. So it's always this cat and mouse game. It's very hard to defend unless you separate stuff from the internet, which nothing is anymore. Everything's connected, right? So when we're looking for attack vectors, things that are connected to the internet, appliances that call back, and there's 10,000 different things that potentially that you could get root access in to be able to gain access into the network, and then to be able to move laterally and do things. So these are all problems, right? All huge problems for OT. And we know that, you know, IT things you can manipulate, turn off, you know, websites and stuff. But if you're shutting down power plants with OT, like we're talking real physical things that potentially you can do to people. So let's just go to the next slide. So when we're talking about security framework, I think we've talked this all day today. So I'm not going to go through this. We've talked about all these different things. So I have a question. What is a cyber range? I throw it out to the crowd. There she is. I look at her smile. She looked up and smiled. What's a cyber range? What do you consider a cyber range?
A rifle range for
there you go. Like a place to train people on, like to shoot at targets and stuff like that. Okay. Anybody else want to give a stab? I'm not going to ask you, Josh. So, Josh, oh, you worked at two different places together where there's ranges and stuff like that. So, all right. Yeah. So let's go to the next slide. So, like, what is a cyber range? So now what we have done is now we've created this realistic environment, right? So you can deploy, deliver, and you can use effective simulations to be able to run your network. So this is the panacea if you can be able to do this. You go in, let's say you're defending a network in your state. go into that network and you be able to replicate it with a virtual digital twin. So you build virtual machines that emulate your current environment. You also have the same tools, the same protocols and everything else, but you build this in virtual environment. You can call it, some people call it sandbox or whatever else, that replicates your real network. And then once you replicate the real network, then you can do automated attacks, red team attacks by using your own tools. So you can do a real world simulation of you being attacked on your operational network, but now on a virtual network that you can destroy, tear down, hack into, and reset. For all. So the point is to be able to replicate what your current network is. Oh, to see which one has an evaluation. There's a multitude of things. What we're getting to today is like, we've kind of figured out the IT part is now. What we currently do for the OT is we do physical emulation, tie hardware into the loop. We have traditional visualization and we tie in the clouds and stuff like that. So what we're going to show you later is we come up with a concept down here to be able to emulate some of the OT stuff that ties into the bigger ecosystem so that everything's tied together. And with all of this range, you know, you've got customized attacks you can do, and we'll talk about that later. You can pull from a bunch of CVEs. The cool part about the customized attacks are that if you have an OT system and you've already been compromised, then you can recreate that attack. And you can completely replay it and have your people defend against it and then reconstitute and have your teams go out to do incident response. So what it really does is force you to do a whole drill of a real world scenario that's realistic, that mimics your actual environment. So instead of doing boring training, you're doing exercise simulations of your stuff, going up in smoke and everybody scrambling to fix it with reports of your chain of command of, hey, this is compromised. Now, what do you do C2 wise? Like, are you changing policies? Are you making decisions? What are you doing? So we've created now like this environment where we can do realistic attacks on a virtual digital twin of your actual networks with your own tools, and then be able to introduce other stuff. And so what we're getting to now is, let's go ahead and go past the attack simulation. Well, we're talking about OT for, okay. So somebody talked to me about OT ranges because I'm not an OT range guy, but these are the pictures they show me, right? They're big monolithic things that cost a whole lot of stuff, and you have to have close proximity and everything else. Next slide. And so here are some of the limitations of having the traditional OT ranges, right? Very expensive. Do you have a good attack simulation for it? Physical access is typically required if you're not tying it to a network. So you know, you're limiting the amount of attack surface potentially to be on. So next slide. So now what we've created outside of our cyber world, and we've modeled this after the persistent cyber training environment that the DoD trains all the cyber mission force, is now to introduce the OT to this. So you get the complete picture of how do you manage the networks and your OT stuff calling out, whether it's through RF or whatever else, to be able to replicate all of that, and then to be able to train your people in a realistic environment. And I'm going to turn it over to David to talk OT worlds a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah, so you just saw this this slide. This is just the architecture of our range, where a good range needs to be built on modern technology. It needs to be modular. It needs to be able to connect to APIs and have built-in functionalities that allow you to customize your range, your environment. So we built it on a very high orchestration automation. We have built-in tools around Scenario Composer, which allows you to drop in virtual machines, switches, routers, SCADA system. You can virtualize that in the Composer. You have the injector engine where then you can mimic some of the latest attacks. Scoring and reporting, That's a big piece when you do these team-based or individual exercises. You want an after-action report, which ties also into the competency management. So we've mapped our content to various frameworks so that you can assess teams and individuals down to specific job roles and competencies. So if a member of the team needs to step up in a certain area, you can point them to some content they can skill up and they can rebuild and reuse, as well as platform admin, where you can manage your resources, and then instructor tools for not only conducting on-site, but remote sessions as well. And then, as Grim was saying, we've plugged in the physical emulation piece to this. We can completely virtualize it, or we can keep those old OT systems, as people do like physical hardware in the loop, where you're able to break in, compromise something, set off a sensor, or overflow a sub pump, and you can see that actually happening, the real physical effect. And then some sample simulated processes. We have electrical substation, water system, oil and gas plants. So that should be touched on the next slide. This is kind of showcasing both the virtual piece on the left-hand side, where we can virtualize these systems, or what we've done for clients is built out real world big walls with real hardware, where you see on the left-hand side is the side range software, and then we have sub pumps, PLCs, HMIs, your sensors, and then your various vendor hardware. So we're not stuck to one vendor, we're vendor agnostic, and can move around to what your needs are.
That's like with us, partnering with ICS Village, and if other people have emulators and stuff, it's easy plug and play into the range to make it realistic. So that's the good part of it.
Exactly. And then this slide is just showcasing some of the vendors that we support. Obviously, we're multi-vendor. And then we have different options. People can go for a multi-world environment where you get a little bit of energy, water, oil, and gas, or you can dedicate your environment to one industry specific. So then the next piece is a range also needs to have an intuitive design component. As I said, our Composer app, where you're able to design your ICT network, OT network to what you want it to look like. Then be able to design threats to simulate attacks. Then implement that where you can configure a scenario network, develop the threat emulation, and add to a library where you can have individuals or teams go through and constantly be trained up. As I know, training can get boring. We need to make this as realistic as possible in a safe sandbox environment.
So a lot of times what we do, we have canned stuff on the thing, but what we've done is made a composer, so that way if you want to come in and create your own for your own units, you can go in and create. And we've made everything easy to drag and drop, replicate networks and everything else, so you can do your own specified training for your people without having to be tied to one thing, with bringing your own tools and everything else. So
and then this is just a snapshot from our latest launch of our injector engine version 3. So this is how in that Composer app, you're able to create your own attack flows. So what we do, our team, we get through CTI reports, we get the TTPs, IOCs, and malware of some of the latest attacks. We reverse engineer those, drop them into a scenario where teams can be exposed to certain attacks. We have partnerships with the CERT team in Ukraine. They've developed some SVR campaigns so people can jump on and experience what's come across their pane of glass. So I like to think of this more as behavior as code, where you have individual nodes on the left-hand side, and you drag and drop and connect to form an activity. You can double click those nodes to configure, and you can test and validate that everything is executing on one pane of glass. So you can just have basic traffic generation. You can emulate emails being sent out, and then send out phishing emails, have a macro node to emulate a user opening up that email, downloading or cloning a repository and becoming compromised. So in the back end, this is how we create those attack flows and
Got a
various.
question? Yes, sir.
Are you able to emulate?
Yep. So you're able to, we have a large repository of that stuff, but you're also able to import your own images and containers.
When you all the different OT, thousand different versions. Crockwell has everything from 7 to have all of that baked into this.
Not all the version, if we will be porting all that stuff over. So we'll have those versions available, but
And we can partner with people to plug and play with those
Exactly.
emulation versions, like people like ICS and stuff. So people that have already created that, we just
have our
plug
own
it in.
whole cyber.
Yeah.
We have our own OT cyber lab thing.
Awesome.
PLCs, drives, instruments. You can plug your stuff right into that.
yeah,
It's like you could take our attack emulation potentially and connect it with APIs and start attacking with our injector. And we made all our stuff modular, just so like if you want, traffic generation, we have traffic generation to create emails and stuff in the network to make it look realistic. We have the attack vectors, and then we have the recreation of the network. And so, yeah, go for it. He has to jump in. He can't help himself.
You're able to like export yours in YAML.
Yeah.
I knew someone was gonna come out.
Yes, sir.
Is platform you guys are building, it's all close on.
The vendors. So this is kind of like the overarching one here, David. So if you want to,
Yeah, exactly. So this is just kind of bringing everything into,
yes, sir.
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Last year. Thought through the.
Yeah. For this event, yeah, last year. And they did a talk and we walked through one of the scenarios. Yeah, and then,
Develop it.
what's up?
What did you develop?
This is built on OpenStack and a lot of other microservices.
So
We're able to scale
yeah.
vertically and horizontally. We have the Guinness Book of World Record for the largest on-site cyber drill,
it's like
which is a big pain point for ranges lately. Is
116 nations or something like that. We did a cyber exercise for.
All remote.
Yeah, no, that was on site. That was all on site.
Well,
In JISEC, that was all on site. Yeah.
yeah.
We've ran exercises with the Marines in Okinawa, Quantico, and West Coast as well. So.
Are you talking about in Okinawa?
Yeah, there was no lag or anything.
Have the opportunity for you to.
Well, we've got
Yeah, this is
just a
just
couple more
wrapping
slides.
it
So let's just go. So I'll just wrap it up here. So again, like go to the next slide. Again. So critical applications, right? Like we'll cover these real quick. Train your utility operators to also know the IT space so they can see anomalies potentially in there, and that's a critical thing. For military units, simulate the attacks and battlefield logistics. So what's crazy for us in military is like you don't really, when we talk about not knowing your network. So like I'm an Army guy, I can look at a map and I can look at terrain and I can understand where the hills are and everything else. And when I'm, Air Force has the sky, Navy has the sea. So they all have physical environments, but what do we have? So to be able to recreate cyber terrain. So you have understanding what the network actually is and the components of it. And then to be able to train on that, just like the military does over like, replicating Iraq and going to the desert and shooting each other. It's the same kind of critical applications here, is to be able to replicate the real world environment and make it more of a battle drill or mission rehearsal as opposed to like just training. So next slide. Behind the back. And then here's the call to action, right? Let's all collaborate together. Investment and infrastructure and OT convergence. We're actually going, the old Dreamport TAC has attacked the airport this week. And I think there's 400 OT people that are all coming out to that. So we're going out to support that. So like these conferences and be able to bring people in, the convergence of being IT and OT together are very important to move forward. So, and that's it.